Hello and welcome to the Pickle Jar. My name is Josh and in today's video we're going to be painting up the Primaris Captain from the Indomitus box set. Pickle Jar! Pickle Jar! Miniatures! Excellent! Hi guys and welcome to another Pickle Paints video here on the Pickle Jar. Now today we are not going to be painting any Necrons. I know that it's been a while, but I'm finally making a start on the Space Marines from the Indomitus box set and I'm going to be painting up the Primaris Captain. I've been really looking forward to starting working on the Space Marines from the box set. I got all my Necrons done, they were all done as part of the CWG August Challenge, and I'm now ready to start working on some of the lovely boys in green. For those of you that are new to the channel, I have been working on a Salamander force for quite a while now. I've done a few different tutorial videos and Let's Paint videos for different miniatures, and this is a brand new one to add to the collection. Now, it's been a while since I've painted anything that wasn't a Necron, so I was a little bit nervous before starting painting this, but it all came flooding back to me as soon as I started putting paint on the Mini. Without any further ado, let's get started. So, here he is. This is the Primaris Captain from the Indomitus box set, and he's all built up and based in Wraithbone contrast spray. Now I'm using contrast spray because, funnily enough, I'm using a contrast paint for the base layer on the armour. Those of you that have been following the channel for a while will know that I use the Warp Lightning contrast green for the base tone on the armour, and the more that I've used this, the better at applying it I have got. So you want to apply this in a similar way to how you would apply a wash or a shade or a glaze, in that you want to pay close attention to where you start and finish your brush strokes. So you want to make sure that wherever you finish your brush stroke is where you want it to be darker or more intense with the colour, because it's going to pool when you pull your brush away from the model and leave more paint there. So you need to pay really close attention and really deliberate brush strokes while you're applying this paint. Now, I started off using the contrast paint because I wanted to create a Salamander's army that was nice and bright, but I also wanted to give the new contrast paints a try, and I tried this on a tester model and I thought it was an absolutely fantastic green. I fell in love with it, and like I said, all I do is I add a few highlights on top using moot green and then a mix of moot green and Urea yellow. If you're interested in seeing a full tutorial for the Salamander's armour that I do with contrast paint, there is a tutorial here on the Pickle Jar. I'll pop a link in the top right hand corner somewhere around now if you want to go and check that out. So all I'm doing is just gradually applying it bit by bit, making sure that each armour panel is nice and neat. There's no streaks, there's no tide markings or anything like that. Making sure that it's all applied in a nice, neat fashion. Making sure I'm painting in the same direction all the time so that there's no sort of contradictions in the armour and it all looks nice and neat and even. Once I finish one panel, I then move on to the next and keep going and keep going. One thing to note as well, it is important to try and keep your miniature sort of the same orientation. So keep in mind, I'm trying to keep mine stood up because I'm painting from top to bottom of each armour panel. So I want the bottom part to be darker, and in doing so I am leaving a bigger pool of paint towards the bottom. Now if I tip my model upside down to reach an area that is maybe a little bit harder to paint or something like that, then what I'm going to do is risk that paint running where I don't want it to. So it's always best to try and keep your model the right way up, or whichever way up you need it to be to keep your paint where you've applied it, rather than letting it run all over the place. I like to try and get the majority of the armour done first before I start doing any of the other parts. So now that I've got all the green areas painted with the contrast paint, I'm using the Black Templar contrast paint just for the tabard and then on the shoulder pads, just to sort of fill those in. This isn't the final sort of version of the black, and to be honest, I don't really like the black contrast paint, using it as contrast paint. I tend to use it just as a black base coat when I have been using the Wraithbone spray, just because it covers over better than using your traditional sort of Black Templar regular Citadel paint. I chuck this on, and then all I'll do later on is I'll go over and add a couple of highlights just to sort of brighten up the raised up areas, the sort of raised up parts on the cloth. But it does cover well, it flows nice off your brush because it's a contrast paint, so it's a lot thinner than your regular paint. So, and it's just easy to use, so I tend to just use this to cover up those sort of areas. A lot of people ask me sort of like what order they should paint things in, and I think that this is a very personal question. This is something that's personal to each individual painter. There's definitely some things that it's easier if you paint them in a certain order, or you paint something before you paint something else, just because of it's being in the way later on, or harder to reach, or you're not wanting to mess it up when you paint in a later step. So I tend to paint the largest areas first. So like for this one, I'm painting all the armor first, painting all the green base coat, and I'm putting all the black in, and then I'll start working on highlights, and then after that we start working on the smaller detail parts. For other things, if it's got a lot of skin on it, I tend to try and get the skin done first on a miniature before I paint anything else. Again, it's just personal preference. It's just kind of what I like to sort of try and get nailed and done first, because I wouldn't say struggle is the right word, but painting skin for me is often just that little bit harder, and it takes a little bit more getting to look right and natural. So I try and get that out of the way first, where I'm not worried about paint spilling over onto other bits and pieces, because I don't want to make a mess of them. For this, again, like I said, there's a massive amount of green armor to paint on a salamander, so I try and get that done first, and then all the details go over the top of that, so it makes sense to paint those afterwards rather than painting them first. All I'm doing right now is going over the green armor. I'm starting to apply my first highlight layer, which is just moot green. I'm applying this into sort of raised up areas, edge highlights, anywhere where I think there would be a bit more light reflecting on it. I'm not going full non-metallic metal. That's something that I've never really had a go at, non-metallic metal. Something that I would like to try at some point, more just to sort of get the technique down, rather than because I actually want to use it on stuff. Non-metallic metal is one of those techniques that I've seen done a lot, and there's only a few times where I've looked at it and gone, yeah, that looks really nice. A lot of the time I think it looks really overdone. The couple of times when I've seen it done and it looks really, really nice, it's a bit more on the subtle side, or it's just for like a one-off piece. I think using it on like a full army, I think it might probably look a little bit much. But I like to try and add some highlights, and on that note, like applying highlights to your model is again a very personal thing. It depends on what sort of look you're wanting to go for, how much you need to highlight. So many people look at the sort of heavy metal paint style and they think that they need to edge highlight everything to within an inch of its life, and I often find that yes, they look really nice and they look really clean and neat and stuff, but I think you can get too bogged down in trying to edge highlight absolutely everything. Like, you should focus on trying to highlight the stuff where it makes sense that it is highlighted, because there's more light on that area of armor, or because that's a focal point that you want people to be looking at, or something like that. You need to put a bit more thought into your painting process. Like, why is this area highlighted? Is there a light shining on it, or is it catching the light from something else, or is this a part that I particularly want someone to look at? That's the kind of things you need to be thinking about when you're applying highlights and shade and things like that, and also when you're choosing colours. Colour choice is a big part of that. Is, do you want people to look at this, or is it sort of background on the model? And I don't mean background as in, is it far into the model, is it like in the recessed areas? I mean stuff like belts and purity seals and all the little bits and pieces of detail that are there and you can see them, but they're not necessarily a focal point that you want people to be looking at over other areas on the model. I think it's important to sort of take your time when you're applying highlights and stuff as well, because you can quite easily overdo it. I think it's important to sort of take your time, apply a little bit, have a look at the model, apply a bit more, have a look at the model, look at it as a whole rather than focusing in on each individual part. Like, does this look like it sort of pulls the model together and it finishes the model off? Are there any areas that maybe need a little bit more of a highlight because they're lacking compared to some other areas? So for this model in particular, I focused on his left leg, the chest sort of area, and his helmet for the main areas where I want to highlight, because his left leg is sort of forward compared to the rest of the body, and obviously the helmet is up at the top, so there's going to be a lot more light reaching the helmet. So that's why I tried to focus on those areas in particular for a slightly brighter highlight compared to the rest. All I'm doing now is applying some base layers onto some of the gold trim areas that I'm going to be painting. So I'm just using a Rhinox hide, just watered down slightly, and while I've got that on my palette, I'm also applying that to the leather area. So there's the belt that goes all the way around, and then the gun pouch on the back of him. I tend to use Rhinox hide for all my sort of base, especially for gold metallic colours, and definitely for the brown colours I use it. It's a really nice rich colour, it covers really nicely over almost any paint, so that's all I'm doing. And then I'll just go in with a highlight of a lighter brown using Baneblade, adding some sort of scratches onto the gun pouch just to add the impression of like some wear and tear on there, and then just a slight highlight onto the belt on the front. Decided that I didn't want all the metallics on the model to be gold. There's going to be quite a lot of gold on the chest and then around the right shoulder pad, so I decided to add some silver on here for the bits of pieces that are sort of on the front of the tabard, the little bits of detail on there. So all I'm doing is chucking a base coat of lead belch down here just to cover those over, and then what I'll probably do later on is add a slight gold dry brush over the top just to sort of bring them in so that they tie in with the rest of the model. They don't stand out too much, but also so that they are not the same bright gold that I'll be painting the chest and the shoulders later on. For the gold on the model, I do like to go fairly bright, a lot brighter than a lot of people do, and I actually do paint them gold rather than sort of like very yellow colours. So all I'm doing is using Balthazar gold as a sort of base coat, putting that on over the top of the brown, trying to leave some of the recessed areas in the Rhinox hide to create the shadow and shade there. And then once I've applied this layer of Balthazar gold, I'll go back over and add some Retributor armour on. I'm mixing a bit of Balthazar just to dull it down a little bit so it's not quite as bright as it would be if it went on straight from the pot, but just so that it's got that little edge. I do like quite a bright gold. I think it works really nice with the green colours on the armour and with the blacks that are on there as well. It's some nice contradictory tones that work really well opposite each other. Once I've put all the gold paint on and everything's on, I can then just go over it with a light wash, just using Adrax Earthshade. Go over it with a wash, again just to sort of pull into those recessed areas and just create some nice contrast between the different colours. Now this guy comes with a cool fancy shield. There's a few of guys in the Indomitus box set that have got the cool shields. This guy's got the coolest shield because obviously he's the captain, so he's got a badass skeleton attached to the front of his. So all I'm doing is just chucking down a base coat of Wraithbone, and then I'm going to use the Skeleton Horde contrast paint on this because I think it's an absolutely gorgeous colour, and any opportunity I get to use this, I am absolutely going to use this. It is a fantastic skeleton colour and it works really well for sort of parchment and stuff as well, so you'll see me using this later on for the purity seals and things like that because it works really well for that as well. So once I've got the base coat of Wraithbone down, I'm just going back around the rest of the shield, just putting a layer of Black Templar on the bits where I'd sort of dry brushed and it's spilt over onto the rest of the shield. I want that to be nice and tidy later on before we chuck the Skeleton Horde contrast paint on. I decided that I wanted to give the shield a gold trim to tie it in with the gold symbol on the chest. So I'm just using the same technique, putting down Balthazar gold as a base, and then all I want to do later on is put a mix of Balthazar and Retributor on the palette and then just sort of feather it on in select areas so that I'm not covering up the entirety, just so that it gives the impression of the metal being worn in some areas and slightly shinier in others. And then once I've put that on, I will go around and just do a little bit of edge highlighting in some areas just with a lead bell silver, just to sort of look like the edges have sort of worn down a little bit, as I think they would do for something like this that's being used in battle. It's being used to sort of deflect hits and blows and stuff, so it's going to be a little bit battered even if you are trying to keep it in the best condition that you can. Now, I actually lost the footage of me applying the Skeleton Horde contrast paint and then attaching the model, attaching the shield to the model itself. But all I'm doing here is putting the contrast paint on the hand on the top of the shield. Once I've attached it, just so I can sort of blend that in with the model so that it doesn't look too out of place and that you can't tell that it's been sub-painted and sub-assembled. Not got much left to do now, so I'm just finishing off a couple of the details now that I've attached the shield to the rest of the miniature, and then we're going to look at tackling the sword. So again, people that have been following the channel for a while will be very familiar with the technique that I'm using on the sword here. So chucking a base coat down of your real yellow, and then it's just gradual sort of feathering layers of orange and red, and then finally a brown, getting further and further out from the center each time I do this, making it really uneven, so when it's all finished and done, it gives the effect of the sword sort of being on fire and being really hot. I've got a full tutorial for this up on the channel. It's been really popular. I think a lot of people have used it, and I love seeing people tagging us on Instagram and Facebook and things where they've used this technique and they're really proud of the results that they've got. That's absolutely fantastic. So if you want to know how to do this and you want to watch a quick tutorial, I'll chuck the link in the top right hand corner about now. The main thing with this technique is to just take your time. Don't try and do it too even. Don't worry about it looking messy. It looks awful until you put the brown on, and then that's when it sort of ties it all together, and then you can sort of work out what you want to do from there, like in regards to any extra highlights or extra bits and pieces of detail. This is the model all finished. I am absolutely over the moon with how it looks. I think it looks absolutely fantastic. I love how the sword turned out. I loved how the armor turned out. It's been such a long time since I've painted any salamanders, and I'm just super happy to be back painting the boys in green. So there you go, guys, that is how I painted my Salamander Primaris Captain from the Indomitus box set. Now, I've been really looking forward to starting work on the Space Marine half of this box set for such a long time. I've been enjoying painting my Necrons, don't get me wrong, I do still love my Necron force and I've got plenty more of them to go, but there's something about painting Space Marines, painting my Salamanders in the scheme that I've picked that I just really, I love doing it, and I'm so happy to finally be painting some more Salamanders again. If you want to see more of my salamanders, there are plenty of videos right here on the channel. There'll be links in the description and links popping all over the place on the video, so make sure you go and check them out if you enjoyed today's video. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and a comment down below, and if you're brand new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button to keep up to date with all the future content. If you want to see more of me, you can catch me every Wednesday evening here at 8 PM where I do a live stream, and you can catch me over on the Chilling Wargamers channel every Thursday evening at 8 PM where I stream with Spud and Elston. If you want to help support the channel, we have our very own merch store where you can buy Pickle Jar t-shirts, face masks, mugs, and if you want to donate straight to the channel, there's a link in the description for that as well. If you want to keep up to date with everything that we've got going on over here at Pickle HQ, be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, the links for all of which are down below in the description. We post on there so you can keep up to date with what we've got going on every day. That's all from me, and I'll see you next week with another video.